do you get from Cornwall to Crewe? We'll speak to the couple who found it was cheaper to fly via Spain than get the train. And a behind-the-scenes look at one of the biggest boy bands in history. We'll have the latest from the red carpet premiere of a new documentary about Boyzone. All that to come, and much more on the UK Tonight. Good evening to you. 6 million Jewish people were murdered during the Holocaust. More than 1 million of them at the Auschwitz concentration camp. Today, survivors, world leaders and royals gathered there to remember. 80 years since the camp was liberated. The message from survivors: hatred only begets more hatred. Killing, more killing. Around the UK tonight, people are remembering too. Lighting candles in their windows, with buildings and landmarks lit up in purple to mark Holocaust Memorial Day, from Downing Street to Belfast to Edinburgh and Cardiff. These illuminations designed as a symbol both of remembrance for those people killed for who they were and a stand against prejudice and hatred today. Well, earlier, around 50 survivors took part in a service of commemoration, which began with a series of photos set to music by a German Jewish composer. The last time anyone saw James Simon, he was sitting on a suitcase on a railway platform, jotting down a few thoughts for a piece of music. He then boarded a train to Auschwitz, where he was killed in a gas chamber. A freight train car, a symbol of the 80th anniversary of the liberation of the German Nazi concentration and extermination camp, was placed directly in front of the main gate of Auschwitz-Birkenau, where the service took place today. Author Tova Friedman spoke at the ceremony. She was brought to Auschwitz with her mother when she was just 5 years old. She warned that an atrocity like the Holocaust must never be allowed to happen again.
I'm here to talk about those who aren't here, and I'm very honored to speak to this kind of audience that has come from all over the world to mourn, remember, and honor the memory of our people who were so brutally murdered by the Nazis. However, we are also here to proclaim and to pledge that we will never, never, ever allow history to repeat itself.
The King has become the first serving British monarch to visit Auschwitz, where more than 1 million people, mainly Jews, were murdered at the hands of Nazi Germany. King Charles also visited the Jewish Community Centre in Krakow. There, he met Holocaust survivors and heard from volunteers and members about the centre's mission to rebuild Jewish life in the city. The King used his address at the event to highlight how the world today remains full of turmoil and strife, and how remembering the events of the past is a responsibility everyone must take.
To be in Poland on International Holocaust Remembrance Day, as we commemorate 80 years since the liberation of Auschwitz, is both a somber and indeed a sacred moment, as the number of Holocaust survivors regrettably diminishes with the passage of time. The responsibility of remembrance rests far heavier on our shoulders and on those of generations yet unborn. The act of remembering the evils of the past remains a vital task, and in so doing we inform our present and shape our future.
Susan Pollack was just 13 years old when she was deported from Hungary and sent to Auschwitz. She was separated from her mother and brother as she passed through the gates there. A fellow prisoner quietly told Susan to tell the Nazi guards that she was in fact 15, and that was advice that ended up saving her life. Susan shared her story with me. Can you take me back to when you were 13?
When I was 13.
And Auschwitz, because you started out in Hungary as those anti-Jew laws came in and the story developed as we well know now. You ended up in Auschwitz, separated from your family, and you've described it before as another world with death all around us all the time, which is a statement that stopped me in my tracks, because it's important for people never to forget the horror of that place and what happened there.
We had been put in a camp in Hungary, not in Germany, not in Auschwitz yet. We tried our very best to please. We tried our very best. And in fact, we were desperate for truth, what was going on elsewhere, because we were totally ignorant what was going on in Germany, Nazi Germany, and other countries. And I'm a village person, so we had no knowledge at all.
From Auschwitz, you went on what was called the Death March to Bergen-Belsen. Just to give people listening to this interview some context, you were close to dying, suffering from tuberculosis, typhoid, and malnutrition. Do you remember much about that time? Because it was a time so close to liberation, but you were so close to death.
I was. In fact, I accepted death. I wanted to die. I wanted to die. I had no energy anymore. Where I was liberated was in where was that? In Bergen-Belsen. And I couldn't walk. I could hardly talk. And I crawled out to die, because, I mean, there were just mountains of corpses in Bergen-Belsen, mountains. And I felt a pair of hands lifting me up, a gentle pair of hands lifting me up. And he was a British soldier. He didn't explain anything about, because I wouldn't have understood anything anyway. They took me in that waiting sort of little lorry or whatever, and they washed me. I remember that quite clearly. Washed me and provided a bit of food. I was liberated. I couldn't believe it. I could not believe it, because discussion, and it was obsolete. I mean, no one knew anything. No one expected to survive. We welcomed it. We would have welcomed it. The conditions were so impossible. And I remember a woman asking me, I don't know what language she spoke, because I only spoke Hungarian. And we'll take you somewhere safe. I just nodded. I remember it like yesterday. And I was there for a few days. They shaved my hair as it was shaven in Auschwitz. When we were entered Auschwitz, immediately they shaved our hair. And then we were taken to Sweden, a remarkable happening. And we got food regularly. And we had a Jewish, I think he was a Jewish man, a youngish man in his 20s, and he played music every night. And how the lights were turned off, and he played classical music every night. And that is what saved my life as well, in terms of thinking and hope and understanding.
Susan, how do you relive your story? Because I know it's important to you. As I said, it's a privilege to talk to you today because this is a first-hand account.
First of all, the I did not exist after entry into Auschwitz. That's where we were taken first. I mean, knowing my mum, I was told, just give you an example, I was told my mum was gassed. How do you feel that? It was just totally oblivious of what he was talking about. I didn't pay attention. And what could I do? And since the entry into Auschwitz, where somebody, a Hungarian-speaking person, whispered, "Say that you are 15 years old." I wasn't 15 yet. And I just nodded. I didn't have a voice anymore. And when the Nazi came, and I spoke a bit of German, "Wie alt bist du? How old are you?" And I said, "Ich bin 15 Jahre. I'm 15 years old." So, meaning that I might still be useful.
Your story, your testimony about what happened to you is a reminder of what happened. And anti-Semitism, you know, has always been around. It didn't end with the Holocaust.
Yes.
Sadly, it's always been there in some form. The hope is that it'll decrease with actions from people like yourselves educating others. But it feels like we've actually seen the opposite happen in recent years. How does that make you feel?
I think it's ignorance. I'm trying to soothe my anger. Ignorance, and not realizing, not really accepting the reality of the hate against us defenseless children, or even making any sense of what this Holocaust was about.
We're living at the moment in uncertain times, aren't we? Around the globe, there are wars happening, new governments forming, migration, climate change. Feels like there's a lot to worry about.
Yes.
You sit here having been through the worst of what human beings can do to one another. So I just wonder if you have a final thought for people watching, a message of hope and encouragement.
I would say, bear in mind, we believe in kindness, in helpfulness. You help yourself. It makes you feel stronger.
Susan Pollack speaking, to be a real privilege, as I said, to speak to Susan and help her tell her story here on Sky News. Well, in the UK, survivors have been lighting candles and sharing their own testimony at a Holocaust commemoration ceremony at the Guildhall in London. The Prince and Princess of Wales attended, paying their respects to survivors. Speaking at the ceremony, Sir Keir Starmer said, "It is a duty for all of us to make never again finally mean what it says." Sky's Lisa Holland has more.
At a time of continuing conflict in the world, heightened security at London's Guildhall, current events inescapable at the UK's commemorations. A service not only to mark the 80th liberation of Auschwitz, but on this day, every year, the Holocaust and subsequent genocides are remembered. Now, in their 80s and 90s, up to 70 Holocaust survivors were able to attend the ceremony. Many more, perhaps too frail, unable to come. In the minds of a few and the imagination of most, they remembered the lives lost. The Prince of Wales also spoke of his great-grandmother Alice, who risked her life offering refuge to Jewish families in Greece.
She was sometimes interviewed by the Gestapo and used her deafness to an advantage, pretending not to understand their questions or what they were talking about. It worked, and they soon gave up. Thanks to her, the entire Cohen family survived the war.
The Prime Minister revealed his ambition for greater understanding of the Holocaust to be taught in schools.
And where is never again, as anti-Semitism still kills Jewish people? Today, we have to make those words mean more. So we will make Holocaust education a truly national endeavour.
Before the service, it was a chance to reunite with survivors the Princess of Wales had photographed 5 years ago.
She's warm-hearted, kind, like a friend.
What did the Princess of Wales say to you?
How nice to see you, Stephen. Asked her how she was, and she said, yeah, she was fine.
Also at the service was Alfred Garwood. He was taken to Bergen-Belsen concentration camp with his family as an 8-month-old baby. After the war, they tried to rebuild their life in London.
The recognition of the terrible nature of what the Holocaust did to those of us that survived, as well as to those that died, means that it has some meaning, has some importance.
The message of this service at a time of rising anti-Jewish and anti-Muslim sentiment to learn from the past in the hope of a better future. Lisa Holland, Sky News at London's Guildhall.
Well, let's speak now to someone you may know as TV personality and barrister Rob Brinder, but who has also become really well known as an advocate for Holocaust survivors and their stories in his role as chair of the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust Advisory Board. He was at the event at the Guildhall this afternoon. Rob, really good of you to join us tonight. Thank you so much. I was just listening to that report there and the words of the Prime Minister, and it's something I spoke to survivor Susan Pollock about, those words, never again, and just how much weight they carry. And the Prime Minister saying, now more than ever, we need to make those words mean more.
Yes, he's entirely right. And thank you, Sarah-Jane. What a beautiful interview, and one that's so important to hear from the dwindling number of survivors. And I wonder whether you feel, just like everybody who listened to the service, but I guess I'm speaking to you in particularly, that you now are a witness, having heard that extraordinary story. And the reason today is, of course, a day that commemorates despair and hopelessness and Auschwitz and the Holocaust and the killing of Jews. It also commemorates something really powerful as well, which I suspect you felt when you left your encounter in that interview, which is hope. And so Holocaust education is so essential and important because it reminds us all that we have a responsibility. You now as a witness, every person that's heard the story of a survivor, every young person that's educated about what hate can do, they have a shared obligation. We have a shared obligation, not just to teach them, but to go into our communities alongside them and do that with courage, because hate is on the rise in the world, and we, all of us, have the power to stop it.
Yeah, I use the word privilege when I spoke to Susan about speaking to her, but you're right, with that privilege comes a sense of duty. You are second generation of a family affected by the Holocaust. Your grandfather, Morris, one of the Windermere children, and millions never got the chance to share their story. Thousands who survived, many of them couldn't feel that they could share their story. And that is something that you felt with your grandfather as well, in terms of his story, but as with so many survivors, it is difficult to talk about. We're talking about one of the most traumatic events in human history. And it was pieced together while he was alive, but also after he died. So perhaps you can tell us a bit about that piecing together of history and the story you collated that you now, take as your duty to share.
Yeah, like the majority of the survivors, exactly as you describe, it's too traumatic to share. And as a child, especially for my mum, he lost his family. So his 4 sisters, his brother and his parents were murdered in Treblinka. And he never spoke about it. It would come out in moments during my loving relationship with him. And I was with us till I was 21. But despite knowing that he had been through something, it never came out in one story. There were just jagged suggestions of what he'd been through. And when he died, despite having been in some comfort, around his bed, dotted about the place, were little napkins of food, just in case. And then after he died, I was able to colour in that story of a life of lives in Poland, there for 200 years, rooted in all of the vestiges of the modern world, feeling safe, that disappeared, that was ended because of hate. And, today we commemorate the liberation of Auschwitz, but, I often share, and I hope that we reflect, that that building, that place, that story is the end of the journey. And now more than ever, we have to refocus on how that story began. And, I always think of my grandfather's story and the Holocaust being the appalling tragic end, but also reminding as many people as possible of the beginning. This hatred took root in Germany, a place that wouldn't have felt dissimilar from where we sit now, with all of the vestiges of the modern world. And so consequently, we feel safe. And actually what happened was that catastrophic economic events, people feeling aggrieved by treaty, and the wrong man coming to us at the wrong time, being in the right place, pointing at people and telling this benighted population that they are responsible. And then 10 years on, legislation changes, and then we end up in the depravity of Auschwitz. And so today is, of course, about commemorating the past, but it's a call to everybody. When we say never again, one of the things we all, regardless of our political complexion, regardless of where we come from, regardless of our ethnicity, the thing that my grandfather loved so passionately was this country and the gift of being in a democracy under the rule of law. And only those like you've experienced and heard, who have touched the face of tyranny, truly gift us the sacred nature of that. And so, as we sit here freely speaking about this, you and me today, and as we go into the world, it's worth remembering that this didn't happen overnight. And so it's up to us to stand in hope against hate in all its forms. That's what we were commemorating today, and that's what my grandfather's story is about, as are all of the survivor stories.
Yeah, Rob, this is a story that will always be relevant, and I know on Holocaust Memorial Day, you not only commemorate what happened to Jewish people, but, victims of genocide across the world. And you make a good point there in terms of, Germany seen as a democracy, a thriving country, and things changed so quickly. And I touched on it in my interview with Susan there. Anti-Semitism has always been there. But it particularly feels that it is on the rise today. Social media demonstrates that. You don't have to be a member of the Jewish community to feel it and see it. And I would just like a reflection from you in terms of how you feel about that, because that's difficult, I would imagine, to deal with, particularly on such a poignant day like today.
Precisely, but there's the bad news and the good news. The bad news is you're absolutely right. The spike in anti-Jewish, racist, anti-Semitic hate online it spiked the day after October the 7th, for instance. important to just reflect and think about that timing. And undoubtedly, you know, my beloved nephews and kids of my family friends go to school, Jewish schools, state schools, and they do so under fear and under threat every single day. You know, a parent taking their kid to a local school does so knowing courageously that there's a chance that school might be attacked. That's the situation in 2025, and just one of countless examples of anti-Jewish racism. That's true. But we also have to be a little bit mindful, Sarah-Jane, not to speak up that hate and instead speak up the courage of the British public. And, you know, frankly, social media has a dark gift to curate the content of our news and to perhaps rather skew somewhat and over-amplify those voices of hate. I know, in fact, I more than know and more than suspect that most of the British public from across every community, I go into schools with every background, every age, every ethnic complexion, and they are courageous. They do stand alongside the Jewish community. And for every person that would walk and march in anger and in, above all else, hatred towards Jews, there are countless others in our country that just need the courage and to be reminded that they have the heroic capacity to stand up for and alongside this tiny Jewish community in our country. We're only 250,000. And, you know, I find that allyship, and I have this year. Not everywhere, not enough, but to be fair, and it's important to remember that it is there. And the last thing I'd say about one of my great heroes, Maya Angelou, said, you know, you can't practice any of the virtues without courage. And I feel as sure as I can, and I'm as hopeful as I can be, that the British people are courageous.
Well, Rob, that's a really good note to end on, because talking to survivors, yes, they talk about the horrors, but they also talk about hope and fortitude. Rob Rinder, really good to talk to you today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, and thank you all.
For your time.
Thank you.
We'll stay with us here on Sky News. We have a special programme to mark the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz. That's coming up from 9 o'clock with Anna Botting. Still to come on the programme.
Hey, on your way, keep moving.
Glasgow gang facing life behind bars over Scotland's biggest child sex abuse ring. And counting the cost of social care cuts across the UK, we have a special investigation for you. And avoiding sky-high train fares, the couple who travelled over 1,000 miles to Spain and back, only to end up in Crewe.
I'm Deborah Haynes, Sky Security and Defence Editor.
The reality of life under Russian fire.
People don't want to leave, even though help is here to evacuate them. They say they want to sort out their belongings first. It's absolute chaos.
Fire, shouts the commander. There's a dash to safety as Russian drones will be trying to find this position.
We've now got to wait inside the shelter to see if there is incoming. I've been covering Russia's full-scale war since it began, witnessing the terror and the trauma.
When rockets fall, I try to hide my head under my toys.
Illustrating Ukraine's lost childhood. Hopes and dreams framed by war.
Conflict in the Middle East is another major focus.
An incredibly dangerous moment.
We saw the missiles streaking across the sky. We saw the intercept going up, and then we saw the explosions when the intercepts were successful. With global threats rising, I also explored defence and security in the UK and across NATO.
This US aircraft carrier is operating in European waters in a deliberate show of force.
This is routine training for NATO, but should Russia's war with Ukraine escalate significantly, pilots like these could be called upon to go into combat for real.
Tucked away in the National Archives are some of the UK's old defence plans.
The scale of this bunker underlines how seriously governments took the threat of nuclear attack and global conflict. Should allies listen to Vladimir Putin's sabre-rattling?
No, they shouldn't, and they don't.
Sky News, the full story first.
Mandatory evacuation, you must leave!
For many people, Harvey is far from over.
People here believe the water will be this deep for weeks.
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent.
Are you trying to run me over, Sir Philip?
No, go away.
Look like it, sir. Will you respond to those who made accusations, Sir Philip?
Can you go away?
Sky News, the full story first.
Seven people will face life behind bars after being convicted over a child sex abuse ring at a Glasgow drug den. The court hearing how 3 children were introduced to a world of Class A drugs and alcohol, then regularly exposed to sexual violence. Police said the victims had suffered unimaginable abuse. Our Scotland correspondent Conor Gillis reports now from Glasgow, and just to warn you, his report does contain distressing content.
Is this what evil looks like?
Oh, don't!
The grotesque gang responsible for Scotland's biggest child sex abuse ring. The paedophiles who organised regular nights to rape children. Now behind bars, here they are, unmasked one by one. The heroin addicts who laughed as their innocent victims were sexually abused on an industrial scale after being plied with alcohol and cocaine.
Such depravity as you displayed against young children is beyond my experience. As was said in the aftermath of the trial, this is not typical behaviour. Such extreme abuse of children seems to be rare. Children showed extraordinary fortitude, strength and stamina, undergoing months and years of interviews as investigators struggled to discover and comprehend the full extent of what you had done to them.
Branded monsters, this is the filthy drug den that was swarming with rapists here in Glasgow, where a youngster was shoved in a microwave and oven, where older children were forced to sexually abuse the youngest as adults watched, to the horror of those who thought they knew them.
The 2 ringleaders, I know, they've stayed up in my flat and whatever. It's just disgusting.
They've stayed in your flat?
Some of them, I just hope they'll get the key thrown away, honestly.
This was the largest prosecution of its kind in Scottish history, raising significant issues about what the authorities knew. The court heard that there had been concerns about the children for several years before action was taken. And that is now at the centre of a major review announced more than a year ago, but is yet to deliver any answers about what's been called a disgusting and disgraceful scandal.
It's very hard to find the words, adequate words, to describe how shocking and horrific what's happened to what were very young children over a prolonged period. We can't afford to turn away from the lessons that need to be learned in order to protect all of our children from such horrific abuse and neglect.
And there are only 2 questions left here. Why did these children suffer such terror, such a miserable existence? And are the authorities capable of change to prevent history repeating itself? Conor Gillis, Sky News, Glasgow.
Still to come on the UK tonight, a special report into the human cost of cuts to social care across the country. And a walk down memory lane for fans of the iconic 90s band. We'll have the latest from the red carpet ahead of Boyzone's new documentary. Welcome back. Sky News has found via a survey of social care providers that councils are cutting back hard as they struggle with the rising demand for their services. And in some cases, care is being cancelled altogether. In Scotland, plans to introduce a national care service have been totally scrapped, sparking fears for the future of social care across the rest of Britain. Sky's Nick Martin has spoken to one couple who have had the care they need taken away.
Do the council say that you should be able to do this?
Yeah.
Yeah. What do they say that you can do?
It says I can walk.
Show me that.
Shaking like a leaf. Can't go any further. I'm shattered.
You okay?
Graham and Angela Carson are among more than 1 million older people in Britain who need vital help in their own home. Graham suffers from muscular dystrophy. Angela has Guillain-Barré syndrome, which means her immune system attacks her nerves and joints. Carers are needed several times a day to help move Graham and prepare meals for them both.
Hello, it's Graham. Just want to know if the council have been on for Angela's care package.
It's a week before Christmas, and Angela has been told by her local council that she can no longer have a home carer to help her. And Graham's care package is being reduced. They're shocked.
They just said it was stopped, and I was quite independent, and this would promote my independence more. I don't see how it can. I don't know how I'm going to manage. I don't want to get upset.
Graham and Angela's care is paid for by West Lothian Council. Last November, the council publicly admitted its finances were in a mess, with an £8.1 million overspend, fuelled in part by rising social care costs. It said it needs to make savings. The Scottish Government controls social care, but we've discovered that cuts to care packages aren't just happening in Scotland, they appear to be happening across Britain too. An exclusive Sky News survey of domestic care providers across Scotland, England and Wales indicates a worrying trend of cuts to these services in the last 2 years. 83% of care providers who responded told us that their council had cut the number of care packages being paid for. And 81% of the care providers in our survey said councils had cut the number of hours they're willing to fund, meaning carers spend less time in people's homes. And 77% of these care companies told us they've been asked by councils to complete care tasks that are unrealistic in the amount of time given.
I'm so sorry that Angela and Graham are experiencing what I can only describe as inhumane treatment. And unfortunately, we're seeing similar stories and worse up and down the country. And what it tells us is that councils are struggling with not enough budget to meet the needs which are rising. And councils are being driven to cut costs in quite drastic ways.
So it's been about 3 weeks since we last saw Graham and Angela, and since then Angela has had all of her care cancelled and Graham has had a fair chunk of his taken off him as well. So I'm going to go and catch up with them and see what life is like for them now.
No one is caring for Angela anymore. She has to do everything for herself. And tasks like doing the laundry is slow, painful work. Angela was assessed by council social workers who have the final say on the care she receives. There's no negotiation, but they will reassess it after 6 weeks.
I suppose it's this bit that's probably most significant, and it's brief. Care no longer required.
Yeah.
Angela shows me how difficult it still is for her to stand and walk.
Every time she's getting out of her wheelchair, Nick, that is how she does it.
You see me trying to get up now. I wasn't put that on, that's me trying to get up.
Angela is now preparing meals for Graham and herself. She's doing the laundry, she's going out to do the shopping,
and she's making hot drinks. Just put your hand on your heart for me. How has it been?
Terrible. Terrible. I go to bed at night and that's all I can think about. I feel like I don't exist anymore. I feel if I wasn't here, it wouldn't matter.
What do you think this says about the state of social care in Britain?
It's in a terrible state. I just want it to go back to what it was.
It's broken. It's broken, and they've not got the staff, they've not got the money, so they're cutting calls, saying, you don't need that, you don't need this. And it's all down to money.
We asked West Lothian Council for an interview, but they declined, telling us a consistent and fair approach is applied when reviewing or assessing an individual's care, with any changes to a care plan being made on the basis of assessed need and not to address financial pressures. Social care reform is elusive. Last week, Scotland scrapped plans to form its own national care service after spending £30 million developing the idea. That doesn't bode well for England and the government's plan to create their own national care service here.
Angela Rayner and I are delivering fair pay agreements for care workers.
Health Secretary Wes Streeting has asked Baroness Casey to lead an independent commission on social care reform, but it won't fully report back until 2028.
Some of these people who are accessing home care haven't got time to wait till the end of your conclusion of your Casey review, have they?
Well, look, that's why we've hit the ground running on social care. In the first 6 months, we've delivered the biggest expansion of carers allowance since the 1970s. We've made sure that we're delivering real improvements through the disabled facilities grant to people's homes. We've delivered a real difference to people in terms of the funding the Chancellor provided, but we know there's more to do.
What do you think the future looks like, Angela?
Bleak future.
According to Age UK, more than 2.5 million older people are left struggling because they aren't getting the care that they need. It is a cruel side effect of a broken social care system, which is leaving millions suffering behind closed doors. Nick Martin, Sky News.
Nick Martin reporting there. Right, change of tone, something a bit uplifting, because I think it's been quite a tough hour news-wise, hasn't it? Boyzone, plenty of Boyzone fans out there. It's not just me, surely, is it? Well, tonight is the world premiere of the Sky documentary Boyzone, No Matter What. And it's sure to be a nostalgic trip through the boy band's heyday, exploring the highs and the lows of their rise to fame.
I was told you don't play any instruments at all, none of you.
There's a lot of liars out there.
I was also told that you don't sing at all, none of you.
Oh, God. We were a bunch of kids put together. We weren't perfect, we weren't polished. Hi, I'm Keith, and I'm Ronan. So we're Boyzone. Us 5 lads from Dublin got this far.
Look at us now!
Entertainment and arts reporter Bethany Meneley has the latest from the red carpet.
We jumped back in time 30 years this evening to a time when Mr Blobby was on the TV and John Major was in power. We are going back to the creation of Ireland's answer to take that, of course, Boyzone. They were the brainchild of Louis Walsh, who in his own time would then become a TV celebrity in his own right. We're here to talk about the 3-part documentary looking into the boys' success, and that was pretty immense. They were one of the biggest boy bands of the 90s. They had 6 #1 hits. They had 5 #1 albums and sold 25 million records across the world. But we're not just looking at that success in the documentary from Sky Documentaries. We're also looking behind all that at some of the pressures those 5 teenage boys from Dublin faced in the early 90s and how it went on to affect the rest of their lives. We caught up with some of the boys on the red carpet tonight, and Ronan Keating told us just what it was like for the band to bare their soul for the documentary.
We didn't hold back. We wanted everybody to see everything, you know, the good and the bad, the up and the down sides of Boyzone. It wasn't always simple, it wasn't always easy, it wasn't always nice. You know, people think that it's all glitz and glam and five-star hotels, and that is there, but when you're not feeling very confident or you're not getting on well with the people that you're travelling with, all of that kind of blurs.
Rona Keating there, reflecting on the new Boyzone documentary on Sky, Ronan Forever, obviously. Right, coming up on the UK tonight, avoiding sky-high train fares, we're going to speak to the couple who travelled over 1,000 miles to Spain and back, only to end up in Crewe. And in the sport, Emma Raducanu out of the Singapore Open, losing to a player ranked outside the top 100 action on the way.
I'm James Matthews and I'm Sky's US correspondent, based here in Washington, D.C. Do you fear a fourth indictment? Does your government owe an apology to the British home children?
Great to see you.
Does your government owe them an apology? The fact that they were intercepted, does that indicate a military weakness on the part of Iran? No. Free, wherever you get your news. There's no doubting the strength of this hurricane as it roars through. You can feel a devastating power. It had been a difficult night in a deadly storm.
Bang, bang. You can hear it hitting the windows.
Our houses are okay.
It's depressing. As bad as all of this is, it could have been much worse. Today, this land they call sacred is at the heart of America's electric car revolution.
To me, it's a sacred ground.
The white gold rush is a race that Biden doesn't want to lose. I've covered some of the biggest stories in the world. Donald Trump, 45th President of the United States, it would appear is about to learn his fate.
Escort coming out!
San Quentin houses America's largest death row. They rarely allow cameras onto the condemned block.
James Matthews, Sky News.
I want to be treated equally like everyone else.
It's one step closer to getting out, to getting off death row.
Sky News. Get the full story first. Mr. Trump, James Matthews from Sky News.
Hey, James.
You're diminished by claims that you're a racist.
Question?
Mr. Musk, has your ignorance and ego cost Ukrainian lives? Vladimir Putin calls you outstanding. What do you call him, sir?
He's from Sky News. He's from Sky News. He's entitled to ask me questions.
That gives you the very best of Sky News wherever you are. Breaking news, videos and analysis.
Evidence of the crisis.
Podcasts, watching us live. I'm live in Jerusalem.
Wherever you get your podcast.
All in one place and all at just the touch of a screen. The Sky News app. Get the full story first.
Coming up in a couple of minutes, find out why one couple took a 1,000-mile detour on their journey from Cornwall to Crewe. And yes, they did mean to do it. But first, David Garrido is here with the sport. And we're talking about booze in football, banned in the 80s, but this might be the start of a comeback.
Yeah, certainly in women's football, because there's been a trial involving women's championship clubs. That's the second tier of women's football that's been organised to explore potential ways of enhancing the match experience of women's games. And they also, want to see if it is genuinely safer now. And there's a school of thought that there's a really different demographic of fan at women's games to men's games, which means that actually, consuming alcohol may not be such an issue. And the data bears that out. According to government data, no arrests at women's football matches in England and Wales in 23-24, but more than 2,500 in the men's game. So we've got these 4 clubs that are involved in this trial: Birmingham, Bristol City, Southampton and Newcastle. A bit of a geographical spread. Also some teams that share their grounds with rugby teams, so actually they're used to allowing...
They've got the setup there already.
Yeah, exactly, so they understand that. And the fan feedback has been, on the whole, positive. So if this actually works and they decide that they want to continue exploring the options here, further consultation could be rolled out more widely, not just in the Women's Championship, but also the Women's Super League, the top tier. And that could effectively, I mean, is it the chance they could make this in the men's game?
Yeah, I mean, we're used to alcohol at rugby, horse racing, cricket. Of course, is synonymous with the cricket matches.
Yeah, T20 games, yeah.
But what is the benefit of bringing it back to football? Is this revenue-driven in terms of driving up,
For sure. I think,
for clubs?
Yeah, it is driving revenue to women's football, but also trying to enhance the matchday experience for fans and trying to encourage people to come to the game. So we'll see how it goes. Those 4 Championship clubs are the first ones to do it. Plenty more football and also tennis making the headlines this evening.
Staying connected is vital for business. Sky Business sponsors this report.
Players that fall out of the academy system need something to fall back on.
Do you think we have a responsibility to not only produce elite players, but also good people?
This is the key point.
I've had a really in-depth look into academy football and how it works with certain clubs.
Can you all play on our first team? No, and we're really realistic with the boys. The success is reaching your full potential.
Coming up in this episode, I'll find out what the whole package looks like for the academy footballers.
First and foremost, they try to create a good young person.
At the time, I didn't realise how it can sort of help you, both on and off the pitch.
Sky Business sponsors this report.
Now, what is the best way to get from Cornwall to Crewe? Well, you probably wouldn't imagine that it would involve flying over 1,000 miles to Spain and back, but that's exactly what my next guest did after realising it was actually cheaper for them to fly via Malaga than to just get the train. Well, let's speak to them now. They are Christina and Dan Coulson. Good to see you. Well, this is thrifty and also a little bit bonkers, but I like it. Let's do a cost comparison. How much was the train going to cost you from Cornwall to Crewe?
Well, I did a comparison site on the day, and they were anything from £89 up to £200 each.
And how much were the flights?
It was £19 from Newquay to Malaga and 35 or 36, I believe, from Malaga to Manchester.
I feel like you are like the golden find, because I always hear about these savings on flights. You know, those people that get flights for £1 and things like that. But I never actually find those deals myself. But this was quite easy to find, was it?
No, it wasn't easy. But it's all thanks to a group that I'm on Facebook, the Extreme Day Trips. So using their expertise, it made it possible.
Needs must. And I've just been looking through some of your holiday snaps. Well, I won't call it holiday snaps. It was a very important mission to go and pick up your new car, because you had a bit of a run-in with another driver, Christina, wrote off your car, and the only car you could get was up in Crewe. So talk to me about this lovely day out in Spain you had, because you had a bit of a stopover as well, made a day of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, either way, whether we'd have got there by plane or whichever, we'd have needed a night up there for the garage to be open the next day. So we decided to make the most of 8 hours in the sun instead.
There was a bit of ice cream, a look at the sea, a couple of pints had.
Oh, yes.
I mean,
yes.
And then I bet the car drive back from Crewe to Cornwall was a bit of a letdown, was it? How were the new wheels?
It wasn't too bad, to be fair. It was a lot cheaper in fuel.
Yeah, I was going to say, the service stations probably don't quite have the same sort of appeal as a lovely little bar in Spain. But would your advice be for people to get out and find those deals? Because this is quite the find.
Definitely. If it gives you the chance to go and see somewhere new at the same time as doing something you've got to do, then why not?
I love it. I love it. Christina and Dan, giving us inspiration to look for those deals when we have to travel somewhere, because let's face it, the train fares are expensive, and I know that Great Western Rail, the main operator in Cornwall, fares 2.2 times higher than the average across the EU. Good to see you. Safe travels for your next journey.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye.
I saw police being forceful, pushing young men and women to the ground as they made almost 100 arrests. Will the cold affect your voters?
Well, we have a lot of tremendous support.
Free, wherever you get your news. The people here know that worse storms may well be on their way. I'm Martha Kellner and I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.